One.
Hello, and welcome to Working for Our Future, a digital town hall presented by Teen Vogue and Friends of Bernie Sanders. I'm Lucy Diavolo, politics editor at Teen Vogue. Tonight, I'll be joined by 6 young people from across the country who all have something to tell us about the work they're doing in these unprecedented times. The entire year has been a powerful reminder in how the personal is political, and we'll hear about the work they're doing to build their own futures and the work they're doing to build better futures for each other and all of us. I'll also be joined by Senator Bernie Sanders, the Vermont independent whose back-to-back presidential campaigns have inspired young people across the country to start organizing and building a better future. But before we begin, we've put together a short video to set the mood.
The world is changing. This is the United States of America, the richest country in the history of the world. And we cannot continue massive income and wealth inequality, 90 million people uninsured or underinsured. We cannot be the laughing stock of the world in terms of our refusal to deal with climate change or immigration reform or criminal justice reform. In the most important election in your life, we got to work and transform this country.
Now is not the time that we give up. Now is not the time that we hold back. Now is the time where we say no matter the state, no matter the neighborhood, we will stand up and defend and expand the right to vote in the United States of America.
We need everyone involved in some aspect of our democracy. If we don't have everyone involved, we will never have the transformative change we need in our nation.
The disabled, the misgendered, the marginalized, the counted out and pushed aside, this is our moment. The overlooked, the exploited, the movers, the breakers, the builders, the shakers, and the laborers, this is our moment.
The future of our country, in fact, the future of the entire world, rests with the younger people. They are a beautiful generation, a progressive generation. We can transform this country if we all stand together.
Wow. Makes you want to vote, doesn't it? There's a lot on the line in Congress and in the streets this year. And now, speaking of Congress, I'd like to welcome Senator Bernie Sanders. Sanders has long been an advocate for the political power of today's younger generations. Many have returned the favor, as his support was a key element of the multiracial working class coalition Sanders built in 2016 and 2020. He's still fighting in the Senate, where he's championed some of the boldest COVID-19 relief proposals. Welcome, Senator.
Well, thank you very much, Lucy. And let me thank Teen Vogue for helping us put on this very important event. And why is it very important? I don't want to get people nervous out there, but the future of this country and the future of the world, to a significant degree, rest upon whether young people in America will vote. As I said on the tape that you just saw, the younger generation in our country today is the most progressive young generation I expect in the history of this country. You are a generation which has stood up against racism, against sexism, against homophobia, against xenophobia, against religious bigotry. You are a generation, unlike the current president of the United States, that knows that climate change is not only real, but that it is an existential threat to our country and to the entire planet, and that we've got to move forward in a Green New Deal. You are a generation that knows that we need not only criminal justice reform, we need immigration reform, and we need to make sure that the 11 million undocumented people in this country move toward citizenship. So you are a generation that has a lot to be very, very proud of. But here is something you do not have a right to be proud of. And that is your generation votes in much lower numbers than do older generations. And while those numbers are improving and have improved over the last couple of years, The truth is that if the younger generation, which by and large is an extremely progressive generation, if your generation voted at the same percentage rates as older people do, we would be in a position of transforming this country. So as Lucy mentioned, we are right now looking at the most important election in our lifetime, but we are looking at the most important election in the modern history of America. I suspect going back to the Civil War and the 1864 election. We have a president today who is, as I think most of you know, a pathological liar. He is a president who does not believe in science, which is why we are in such a deep hole regarding the COVID pandemic. He does not believe in science in terms of climate change, which is why he has only exacerbated and made a bad situation even worse. So this is a president that must be defeated. And the only way we defeat him is if millions and millions of young people come out and vote in this election, not only for Joe Biden, but also for Democratic candidates for the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. We are now in the Senate to gaining control of the U.S. Senate. And if we can elect, right now we have 47 members out of 100. If we can get 4 more, we will have a majority, and we will be able to fight for agenda. And that agenda means universities tuition free. It means canceling student debt. It means doing what every other major country on earth does, and that is guaranteeing health care to all people as a. It means dealing in a very significant way with a broken and racist criminal justice system and a broken immigration system. It means creating millions and millions of good-paying jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure and by creating jobs as we combat climate change. So this election is one in which we're going to have, if we lose this election, we're going to have to be fighting years. If we win this election and we can gain control over the United States Senate, there are endless opportunities for us to transform this country and create an economy and a government that works for all of us. Now, the younger generation is not only idealistic and ideologically progressive, but they also understand something else. And that they understand that unless we get our act together, your generation will, for the first time in the modern history of this country, have a lower standard of living than your parents. So throughout modern history, what we have seen, in my case, I come from a working class family. My father worked out a whole lot of money, and I've done better than my father. And the expectation is that younger generations do better than older generations. But right now, we're not going up, we're going down. Your generation today, especially during this terrible pandemic, you have lost millions of jobs. The wages that you are getting today are inadequate, which is why we have to raise that minimum wage, by the way, to $15 an hour. In terms of housing, many of you have been forced to go back to live with your parents because you cannot afford an apartment or a home of your own. So your generation has really been hit hard by this pandemic, and those a little bit older than the younger generation were hit very hard by the Wall Street crash. So our job right now is to win this election. And the only way we win it is if you come out to vote. Now, I know some of you are thinking, oh, voting, God, I got to fill out forms and got to walk into a polling place. It's complicated. It's hard. It really is not. And do understand that Donald Trump and the Republican leadership are working overtime to make sure that it is extremely hard for you to vote. In state after state, they are engaging in voter suppression. They're engaging in voter suppression against people of color, against working class people, poor people, and young people. They know exactly what I know, that the vast majority of you, if you vote, will not be voting for Donald Trump and right-wing Republicans. That the vast majority of you believe in economic justice, social justice, racial justice, and environmental justice. And you want a government that moves us a long, long way away from Donald Trump. They do not want you to vote. And that is exactly the reason why you must vote. So let me conclude by simply saying this. If you are worried and upset about your student debt, the inadequate wages that you may be earning, the fact that you cannot afford to go to college, or maybe you're leaving school deeply in debt, if you're worried about the racism that exists in this country and about a awful criminal justice and immigration system, if you're worried about climate change, it is not good enough to complain to your friends and this stinks, this sucks, this is terrible. Ain't good enough. You got to stand up and fight back. And we fight back in a number of different ways. But maybe the easiest way of all is to register to vote and to come on out and vote. Vote early by mail-in ballots, or walk into your polling station where you can vote early, or vote on election day. But no matter how you do it, for the future of this country, for the future of your kids and your grandchildren, for the future of this entire planet in terms of climate change, you have got to get involved. So with that, let me give it back to Lucy and thank all of you for watching this town hall tonight.
Thanks so much, Senator. You raised a lot of issues I hope that we're going to get a chance to discuss tonight. With that, I'd like to turn now to our panel, a group of 6 people who, like all of us, are facing the harsh realities 2020 has created or just demonstrated. They are elected officials, organizers, and essential voices, all on journeys of their own. The impacts of the pandemic have been historic, but for many, existing crises have continued. Perhaps more importantly, each of our panelists tonight embodies the spirit of resilience quickly coming to define the generations of people trying to make our way through these uncertain times and into uncertain futures. In their own ways, each carries with them a sense of hope, of a better world not far off waiting for us. Let's meet them now. First, Hannah Milano.
Hi, my name is Hannah Milano. I'm from Madison, Indiana, which is a small town on the Ohio River. I'm an organizer with Hoosier Action, and I'm here today because drug abuse destroyed my father's life and lack of health insurance took it away. Thousands of families are watching this same story play out in their towns and cities across this country, and it has to stop. My father was a charmer. He was a laid-back type of person, easygoing and non-judgmental. Underneath that carefree exterior was a lifelong drug addict. He used drugs with increasing frequency and destruction throughout my entire life. He couldn't hold down jobs, and for the last 15 years of his life, he was mostly homeless. In high school, my mom and stepfather allowed him to crash on our couch during the winter because they thought he would die outside overnight. I can even remember in high school using money that I saved from my after-school job to buy him food from the dollar store so that he would have something to eat that week. Without a job, my dad had no income and no health insurance. This past May, my father got a very bad cough. Being uninsured, he did not go to the ER. On the night of May 14th, he walked outside and laid down on a picnic table in a trailer park. He died that night alone and with no dignity. He was a good person and he didn't deserve to die like that. My dad's story in life does not end with his death. My family has lived paycheck to paycheck my entire life. Not even just paycheck to paycheck, because I remember my mom taking out payday loans to get us through. To this day, my family still has debt that causes anxiety and fear about the future. And now my sister fights a daily struggle against the addiction that killed my father. This country is supposed to be so much more than that. We all deserve better. How is it that millions of us are struggling, living uninsured and paycheck to paycheck, while the super rich and big corporations hoard resources and dodge taxes? I believe that every person deserves dignity and deserves access to mental health services, healthcare, and substance abuse programs. Please don't sit this election out. I agree that sometimes the status of this country feels overwhelming, like it's been stacked against us for so long. But that's exactly what the status quo wants us to think. We need you to join us in fighting to vote out Donald Trump. The first step in transitioning America into a country that cares equally for all of its people and not just the elite rich ones is for Trump to be defeated on November 3rd. We can't do this without you.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for sharing your story. Next, let's meet Jewel Hurtado.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us tonight. This is Baby Anthony. My name is Jewel Hurtado, and I am a city councilwoman right here in the rural city of Keensburg, California. Shout out to my Central Valley folks at home who are watching. I ran for office when I was 19 years old, and I was elected at the age of 20. I'm now serving as not only one of the youngest elected officials in the state of California, but as the first openly bisexual councilwoman in my town. I'm also a community college student and a mother to baby Anthony. And I wasn't going to bring him on, but I decided to do that because this baby right here is the reason why I do what I do and why I do my best to fight so hard. When baby Anthony was 7 months old, he was diagnosed with a rare brain genetic disorder called tuberous sclerosis complex. This complex has left him with daily seizures and it has no cure. And that alone was scary enough. But I remember when he was first diagnosed, the nurse told us that one of his medications was going to be $900 for a 24-day supply, and our insurance didn't cover it. At that time, his father and I combined, two working class poor college students only had about $500. I remember crying. We still cry, not knowing what the future holds for our family. And now he has to take medication daily. And if he didn't have insurance, his medications would cost around $4,000 a month. All of this to say, healthcare is a human right and not a talking point that politicians can dance around any longer. I can't wait for that. My son can't wait for that. Our families cannot wait for that. We are struggling. We need elected officials to step up to the plate, to be bold, and to offer real solutions. We need, on that same note, here in the Central Valley, in our rural communities, we are facing a wide variety of issues, all while our state is literally on fire. We are exposed to toxic pesticides, unclean drinking water. We can't breathe our air. Enough is enough, and we need bold climate action, and we need it now. And that is why I believe I was invited here today. I believe I was invited here today because to speak to the point that voting is more than numbers and polls and data and red versus blue, but it's more about the working class families who are struggling to stay alive right now. And as a queer mother to a disabled child, I know those struggles far too well because I deal with them firsthand. And so I'm also here to say, I've said it before and I will say it again here, we must not just vote to vote out Donald Trump, but we need to vote all the way down the whole damn ballot because local elections are so important. Coming from local government, I won my race by only 8 votes. Your vote counts, and do not let anyone ever tell you that it doesn't. This election season, healthcare, gay rights, immigration reform, criminal justice reform, our environment, and so much more is on the line. Please get out and vote and join us together because together we can vote out Donald Trump, but vote towards justice, dignity, and equality for all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jewel. Next, let's meet Denisce Palacios.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Denisce Palacios, and I'm a 23-year-old student at UTRGV, a campus organizer for Texas Rising, and a proud first-generation American who still believes in the possibility of the American dream. I live in a beautiful community called the Rio Grande Valley along the US-Mexico border, and the valley is vibrant, warm, safe, and beautiful, unlike the battle zone that we are often depicted as. We are not rapists. We are not criminals. We're a community built in love and trust where we take care of each other because our government, regardless of the administration, overlooks us. Our government prefers to invest dollars in the over-militarization of our home, continuously funding the deportation of our families and a useless wall. They are deporting our mothers and our fathers, our uncles and aunts, neighbors who work every day in hopes of getting a glimpse of the American dream. Excuse me. We became a national COVID hotspot because of the negligence of our government. We have the highest rates of poverty and uninsured persons in the country. Money that could have been used for relief for our families is instead used to further militarize and intimidate our community. Friends messaged me asking if they would face deportation for getting tested for COVID. People I love are afraid to visit hospitals or clinics because they fear deportation. People I love are unable to seek unemployment benefits, apply for a stimulus check, unable to leave the jobs that put them at risk for COVID. The Trump administration left us to die. This past summer, my dad told me of a friend he worked with at a funeral home. That man died by suicide because he could not bear to continue to literally stack the bodies of community members awaiting to be buried or incinerated. And now he's another body waiting to be buried. No one should live with this pain. No one should live with this much fear. We need to continue fighting for equity in our democracy until and after every person is able to live without fear of being murdered or ripped from their home. We need to continue fighting for equity until and after our government looks like us, thinks like us, and is made of us. We have two choices. We can either mobilize or remain immobile with fear. I choose to mobilize. I'm lucky to be able to work with other community members to register and turn out our community to vote, inform them about our rights, and demand action from the people who are supposed to serve us. There are people in my community at risk, family, friends, and many others who are disenfranchised and will not be able to cast a vote. DACA recipients, TPS holders, asylum seekers who are still awaiting their hearings, peoples whose livelihoods literally depend on this election. Cast your vote in November to elect progressives down the ballot, but don't be complacent. We need to keep working for and demanding the American dream that we deserve.
Thank you so much, Denisce. Really moving stuff. Next, let's meet Carissa Manausa.
Hello, my name is Carissa Manausa. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio in a low-income neighborhood. Throughout my childhood, both of my parents suffered from addiction, and because of this, my siblings and I were in and out of the foster care system. After a couple of years, my father was able to get the help he needed, but unfortunately, my mother was not able to access any of those resources to help her. Because of this, she was very unreliable and absent throughout my childhood. Therefore, I grew up without a mother. She wasn't there for the first time I rode a bike, for my first prom, or for my high school graduation. Because she was unable to access healthcare she needed, she will no longer have any opportunities to see me grow as a person or be there for me throughout the milestones of my life. She passed away in 2018 from an overdose. Since she didn't have any healthcare, including life insurance, we were not able to have any kind of memorial service for her. My family and I received her remains in a box by the mail. This event solidified my passion to help others in their times of need so that no one has to experience the loss I have. I want to help people like my mom access the care that they need to be healthy and support their families. I currently attend Columbus State Community College for their licensed practical nursing program. As a future healthcare professional, I worry about the lack of access to care in my community. People who are already struggling with poverty, addiction, or just lack of access to healthcare have been the most impacted by this pandemic, just like how I know my mom would be. My own family members have been exposed and don't have health insurance, and that is a really scary experience. As a student, the pandemic and lack of response from our government has impacted my ability to thrive in school. I'm currently attending online classes that should normally be in person. I am still forced to pay full price for tuition and books, even though I'm not getting the same education because of the pandemic. As someone who only makes minimum wage and has to pay bills and afford school on top of all of that, I have personally experienced the fear that comes with not knowing what will happen if I or someone in my home gets COVID-19. And I know that I'm not alone in how this has impacted my family and those around me. People all over the country have lost loved ones, lost their jobs, or had their lives turned upside down by the lack of access to healthcare and the lack of coordinated response to this crisis. This is why I feel it's very important to vote for a candidate in this upcoming election who I know understands situations like my own and will work towards real solutions for my community in these uncertain times.
Thank you so much, Carissa. Next, let's meet Kanyinsola Oye.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kanyinsola Oye. I'm a junior political science and history student at Howard University from Columbus, Ohio, by way of Lagos, Nigeria. My name, Kanyinsola, means honey and wealth. And the wealth not in the materialistic standards we think of, but wealth in knowledge, wealth in understanding who we are and the legacy we will leave behind. My name encompasses my work I do as an organizer and everything that will come after me. In 2015, my uncle got deported back to Lagos, Nigeria. I remember visiting him for the first time in the detention center, tears streaming down my eyes. So young, I couldn't quite understand why a man that lived in America for 25 plus years, a man that paid more taxes than the president, a man that shed blood in this country, was being deported. This is why my advocacy is rooted in justice for those that have been constantly silenced by the oppression of this country. The truth is that America doesn't care about people that look like me. It is the people that work the hardest. It is the people that actually fight for true freedom that are constantly silenced. This is why I founded my organization during the summer called Columbus Police Department out of Columbus City Schools, CPD out of CCS. CPD out of CCS is an organization dedicated to eradicating the prison to school pipeline. It is dedicated to uplifting the voices of the youth. We are focused on reimagining a society where the voices of the youth are centered. We are an organization dedicated to understanding the experiences people are going through. Recently, Columbus City Schools broke a $2.8 million contract with Columbus Police Department due to the relentless effort of CPD out of CCS. Although this was a great victory, my work as an organizer is not yet done. The truth is, unfortunately, I have accepted that access to full liberation is not possible in my lifetime. So I fight for those that will come after me. I fight for the students in other districts. These children deserve a sense of innocence. There should be no more Black children having to hold signs that say, "I can't breathe," or "Black Lives Matter." There should be no more children screaming and crying because their parents have been brutalized or their parents have been ripped apart from them. I fight for the innocence of thousands of Black children. I fight for their voices to be heard. I fight for their childhood to be apparent. I fight for their liberation because they deserve a childhood that I was never afforded.
Thank you, Kanyinsola. Finally, let's meet Maria Elena Fournier.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Elena, and I'm a deep canvas and overdose crisis organizer for Michigan People's Campaign and People's Action. And a little bit about myself, when I was around 7 years old, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And because of her citizenship and financial status, we couldn't get access to the resources that she needed. And unfortunately, she passed away about a year later because we didn't have access to these resources. And my father almost immediately developed severe Alzheimer's and dementia. So at the same time as losing my mother and my father to Alzheimer's and dementia, I had to become a caretaker to my twin little brothers at the age of 8, and basically a caretaker to my father because we didn't have the resources to get him the care he needed. And I love my family dearly, but no child should ever have to take on that responsibility because the government did not provide it for us. And if it weren't for my community members stepping up and taking care of me and my brothers, I don't know where I'd be today. They helped us have our needs met. And unfortunately, that wasn't enough. Our community could only do so much. And my father too passed away due to these lack of resources in our community. And now me and my brother are facing the same death sentence a decade later, simply for being poor working class with pre-existing conditions. And that's not fair. And this election and the decisions our politicians make are literally about life and death for me and my family and all of you. And my story is not unique. Multiple families face this every single day. And I decided I had to go in and study public health. So I moved up to Michigan to get this done because I knew we needed to get this taken care of. So my first year in college was during the election year of 2016. And my roommate, which I did not pick, was a Trump supporter who closer to the election came out to me as a white supremacist. She literally told me I was half as human as she was once she found out I was Latinx. And coming from a German family as well on my mother's side who lived through the war, I was baffled that people still believed something like this. And out of fear and curiosity, I began to ask questions to understand how someone could believe such an ideology. And the more she shared, the more I realized she had been misled. And it was at that moment I realized white supremacists are talking to our neighbors and our friends and our community members before we even have the chance to talk about this issue. So since then, I have joined Michigan People's Campaign and People's Action to work on this deep canvassing project. And I didn't have the skills back then to help this poor girl in school, but I do now. And when I first started knocking on doors, I was skeptical, but these conversations ended up changing my life and the lives of those I spoke to on the phones or at the door. And we shared stories and experiences none of us ever imagined sharing with a stranger. Everyone, no matter their political background or affiliation, they were happy and most were in tears to finally have their voice heard and to have a chance to process what they had been through in their lives. And through sharing our experiences with one another in a non-judgmental space, people felt seen and people felt heard. And if we didn't have this conversation, we would have never gotten to this point. And we need to remember that we need to talk to our community members because white supremacists will get to them first. And we don't want that. That is not in our benefit. So if we don't talk to our neighbors, we'll never have anything close to reform or ever a revolution because we can't talk to our neighbors and convince our own family members. So thank you so much. And I appreciate this time.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for sharing your stories, for your candor, and for joining us tonight for this discussion. Senator, I'd love to hear your reaction to the panelists' introductions.
Well, Lucy, let me thank Hannah and Jewel and Denisce and Carissa and Kanyinsola and Maria Elena for that extraordinary, powerful testimony. It takes a lot of courage to get in front of a TV screen and do that, and they did it, and I appreciate it. Now, I think there may be some people who tune in and are watching this thing, and they say, oh, that's just terrible. Look at all these painful stories we're hearing. But, that's the exception to the rule. That's just kind of rare. That is not the case. And the reason that I so much appreciate people having the courage to come forward and talk from their hearts about what's going on in their lives and in their families is you're not just talking for yourselves, trust me. You are talking for tens and tens and tens of millions of Americans. And I get angry at the media a lot, and one of the reasons I get angry is that when you turn on the TV or you read the newspapers, very often they are not reflecting reality. What we saw tonight, what we heard tonight, this is the reality. When people, and almost everybody did, talk about healthcare, 90 million people in America are uninsured or underinsured. Not 1, not 50, not 100. Over 90 million Americans. We heard about prescription drugs. 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford the cost of prescription drugs. We heard about low wages. There are tens of millions of workers today earning starvation wages. They're making $8 an hour, they're making $10 an hour, they're making $12 an hour. We heard about climate change. We know what's going on in California. We know what went on in the Midwest. If we do not get our act together, the planet that you as young people will be inhabiting and leaving to your kids and grandchildren will be increasingly uninhabitable. We heard about racism. We heard about xenophobia. These are not the exception to the rule. Too often, this is the rule. So I have been so impressed, not only by the panelists, but by the younger generation, because this is a generation prepared to ask the hard questions, prepared to think big and not small. Yes, we can do what every other major country does. Guarantee health care to all people is a human right. Yes, we can raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Yes, we can have equal pay for equal work. Yes, we can create millions of good-paying jobs, rebuilding our infrastructure and moving to sustainable energy and energy efficiency as we combat climate change. Yes, we can make public colleges and universities tuition-free and cancel student debt. Now, people out there will say, well, Bernie, you're being utopian, you're being, this is not practical. This can't be done. Yes, it can. If you believe that you deserve those benefits as a human being, as a human right, we can make it happen. But in order to make it happen, we need to educate, we need to organize, we need to bring millions of people into the progressive movement. We're having really good success. We need to do more. And in the next 3 weeks, we have got to do everything we can to defeat Donald Trump so that we can now open the door for progressive ideas to transform our country. So once again, I want to thank all of the panelists for their extraordinarily powerful testimony. And thank you for speaking the truth that millions of Americans are experiencing. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Senator. You mentioned organizing, and that's really what I'd love to get into tonight with the panelists. So, Jewel, I want to start with you. Obviously, it's an election year, a big historic election year for the White House, but as we've discussed, down ballot, as you emphasize, down ballot races. So I'd love it if you could just give the viewers kind of a sense of the day-to-day life of a local politician and the kind of things that are coming across your plate at a time like this.
Hi, thank you, Lucy, for the question. I wanted to really quickly just say as well, when Bernie Sanders lost in 2016 in the primary election, he reminded us and empowered all of us to find our value and say, yeah, maybe we lost this election, but we're gonna run for all the offices because local is so important, like I mentioned in my speech. And so local government is more than just city council, if I can emphasize maybe in on that a little bit. We're talking school boards. We heard an organizer on this panel talking about that school to prison pipeline and how we need to get police out of our schools. And, school board members make those decisions. And so that's another example of local government that is very important. City council is important. Yes, we're talking streets and lights, but also just green space, community gardens, and an environment where you can thrive and grow safely. And so other than that, there's board of supervisors. So all of these local elections are so important because they directly impact your life just as much as Congress and the president. So I just wanted to emphasize on voting for your community college boards, voting for school boards, vote for city councils. And if you can't vote for those seats, encourage other folks to. And last but not least, you don't just have to run for public office. You can always serve on a commission like I did when I was 18, and I advised the city council on Parks and Rec, and now I'm here where I am. So get involved where you can, vote down the whole ballot, and yeah, that's what I got.
Amazing.
Don't laugh at me, Bernie.
No, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. Beautiful.
Okay, cool. Local government, you've been there.
I have.
Yeah, Kanyinsola, she mentioned your campaign with Columbus Police and Columbus Schools. I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about really what that looked like on the ground.
Yeah, so actually our campaign really started off with a push. So we actually protested at the board president's house as our first action because we were like, obviously you control what's going on and you need to change it, not tomorrow, but today. So we're like, okay, we're gonna organize it. And we pulled up at her house and we're like, yo, Miss Ma'am, we need you to, cut this out right now. We need you to cut this contract right now. And she was scared. Of course she was scared. She was a little bit nervous. She was saying like, wow, I didn't expect this. But for me, it's if you're an elected official, you should know the people are coming. Like it is your job to get the job done. And I'm gonna come for you until you get the job done. And honestly, for me, working with students and organizing with students and really helping them uplift their voice to understand you have more power than the elected officials. I think that's what I'm seeing in local races is that elected officials, especially on the school board, continue to silence the students, continue to make them feel like their voices don't deserve to be heard. But once you realize that your power overpowers them, you can change the entire structure of what's going on. And we did. So Columbus City Schools might say they did it by themselves, but we did it. So yeah.
That's right. We're claiming credit. That's right. Denisce, you obviously have a really strong sense of attachment to the place that you're from and the organizing you do there. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about Texas Rising and the work you do with them.
Yeah, so Texas Rising is a project of the Texas Freedom Network. And what we do is we build youth power in Texas, making sure that hundreds of thousands of young people are registered to vote across the state. And we go out and we organize on different issues. San Antonio was also doing a Defund the Police project. Down here, we make sure that people know their rights, right? Because we're along the border. And it's really trying to make sure that young people have a voice in policy, that young people have a voice in the matters that affect us directly. That's what we do with Texas Rising. We're trying to make sure that the youth, that young people who have the power are engaged every single step of the way.
Incredible. That's exactly the kind of stuff we need, right? I heard we might be able to turn Texas blue sometime in the next couple of years. Yeah, Denisce, I think that I'll be watching
We're gonna do
that.
it this year. I think we're gonna do it this year.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Amazing. I want to turn to Hannah now, because Hannah, I know you're with Hoosier Action, and I'd love to hear about the work you're doing out there in Indiana. If you could tell us a little bit.
Yeah, so Hoosier Action is big on contacting working class Hoosiers, trying to get people excited about local stuff that's going on, just like we talked about, because you're right, that's a whole ballot. So like right now, for instance, the Attorney General race is happening in Indiana. A lot of people don't really know what the Attorney General is all about. So we're holding a town hall on October 15th. We're encouraging all Hoosiers to tune in. So we're big about making connections, talking to people. It's not just calling and texting about, you know, who are you voting for? What's going on? Are you registered? We're also like touching base with people. Are you okay? How are you doing with COVID? Do you need assistance with food or with bills? Because people are struggling right now. A lot of people are struggling and things are really bad. And we can't lose sight of the fact that a lot of people are just struggling to put food on the table right now, and we really need them to like go out and vote. But it seems like such a far away thing, but it really matters for right now.
Well said. Well said. Maria Elena, I wanted to get you in on this as well. Specifically, you know, you mentioned we were talking about deep canvassing and you were talking about having conversations with people and really just how transformative that could be. You know, I'd love to hear a little more about, you know, really kind of the power you've seen in that and how this thing that can be very anxiety inducing, talking to strangers, really has the power to change the future.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So deep canvassing has honestly been a life-changing experience for me and for a lot of the people I spoke to. So through deep canvassing, we basically knock on your door or we call you and we ask you like, hey, how are you doing? With everything going on, how are you actually doing? And a lot of times this stops people right then and there, and they're like, wow, someone's actually asking me how I'm actually doing and how I'm feeling and how I'm doing right now in this moment. And we get to talk and resonate a lot with each other. Like, yeah, I'm struggling with the whole COVID crisis right now, or unemployment. And then we start talking about whether or not they're going to vote and what issues actually matter to them and what they want to see in a candidate, or what does a candidate who actually represents them looks like. And when we get into these conversations, we don't fact-splain to each other, because we never get anywhere if we just scream facts at each other. So through deep canvassing, we basically share each other's experiences. So I'll open up about things that I've been through in my life, whether healthcare or through the VA or education. And folks will also, surprisingly enough, open up to me, a stranger, about everything going on in their life, because it helps validate them and it helps them feel grounded in their experience. And we have this very open and non-judgmental space when we're talking to them. And it's been a very interesting experience, because people sometimes are afraid if we're on the opposite side of the spectrum, but we're just here to hear your story, because we can understand each other and know how we're doing based off of each other's stories. And we realize through talking and sharing these experiences that our political views and our understanding of the world are based off of our life experiences. So being able to talk to people about their cognitive dissonances or about how they view the world and what has happened to them is really impactful. We don't call people names at all in these conversations either. So it's really funny sometimes where people will say something like a dog whistle or something racist that they don't realize themselves is racist. And they'll pause right there and they'll just stare at the floor like, oh my God, I just said something racist. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I had that kind of ideology. And it's really shocking, because we don't tell them they're racist, but having a conversation, an open and honest conversation with each other, helps people realize what their experiences are and why they feel this way and how they got to feel this way. So that's just something really important that I've noticed through deep canvassing is we get to have people realize the truth through their own experiences. We don't force anything down their throat. We literally just learn it based off of talking to each other.
Incredible. Yeah. Senator Sanders, I'd love for you to weigh in on the power of local organizing, if you could.
Jewel mentioned a while back, Jewel is a young city councilor in California. I ran for mayor of Burlington, Vermont, taking on the entire political establishment. Nobody thought that I had a chance to win. I knocked on a lot of doors, and I remember, and I say this to people, oh my God, I'm going to have to knock on doors, or I'm going to have to talk to people I don't know. It's kind of scary, and it was for me. In Vermont, it gets pretty cold when we have elections in the winter, and that was campaigning in February. It gets 10 below zero, 20 below zero, and I'd be out knocking on doors, and sweat would be pouring off of me. And I'd say, oh my God, I don't know this person. What am I going to say to this person? But 9 times out of 10, as people have pointed out, if you treat people with respect, they will respond with respect, and we can have a discussion. And to make a long story short, I knocked on a whole lot of doors, did a whole lot of perspiring, and we ended up winning after a recount by 10 votes. And the other point that I would make is when you talk to people face to face, you find that we have a lot more in common than what separates us. When you start talking about healthcare, they will tell you about they're sick and tired of filling out forms, or they have no healthcare, or they can't afford prescription drugs. That's what they will tell you. And when you talk about work, they will tell you, you know what, I'm making $12 an hour. And yet I am paying half of my income in rent. I can't afford to do that. How am I going to raise my kids? You talk to them about that. And when you talk to young people about education, I'd love to go to college, but how am I going to afford to go to college? I don't want to leave school $50,000 in debt. So I think the bottom line is that when you go deep and you have these conversations, you learn that all of us, whether we're black or white or Latino, Native American, Asian American, we share a lot. We all have basic human needs. We all want decent jobs that pay us a living wage. We want decent housing. We want decent education. We want to be able to breathe clean air. We want the opportunity to get a higher education. We believe in justice, not having more people in jail than any other country on earth. Now, I can't remember who made the point, but somebody made the point that if we are not there talking to people, right-wing Republicans and white supremacists are going to fill that void. And they are. They are. When people are feeling hopeless and no one's talking to them, they will absorb racism and sexism and homophobia and everything else. So our job is to stand up, be proud of who we are, to understand that history is on our side, that we are making progress every single day to create a nation and a world, because this world is becoming smaller and smaller, based on the principles of justice. And I often think about that fable, many of you know, the emperor without his clothes, you know. And there was the emperor naked, but no one had the courage to tell the emperor he was naked. Well, what goes on in Washington, let me tell you the truth, does not reflect the needs of ordinary Americans. And what we need from coast to coast is people to stand up and say, you know what, I am a human being. I am entitled to health care. I'm entitled to a decent job. I'm sick and tired of the racism that exists and the sexism and the homophobia and the xenophobia that exists. I am a human being, and I am entitled to human rights. And once we all understand that we are all equally important, that it's somewhat crazy that you have 50 people on top who own more wealth than the bottom half of America, that half of all income goes to the top 1%, that billionaires are able to spend enormous amounts of money on elections. You know, once we understand that we are human beings, and this is what this discussion tonight was about, every single one of these panelists said, you know what, I may have come from a family that did not have a lot of money. I came from a family that did not have a lot of money. But to hell with you. I am as important as anybody else is in this world. And I am entitled to justice. I will fight for justice. So, Lucy, I just want to say that I was really moved by the panelists, without exception. brave
Well, Senator,
people.
I'd love to check in with just one more because, all this organizing work we've been spotlighting is incredible, but I did want to come back to Carissa, the nursing student, and really dig in and ask Carissa, I think we'd all hope that somebody training to be a nurse wouldn't have to worry about making rent, wouldn't have to worry about getting a quality education, especially during a global pandemic. So Carissa, I just wanted to hear from you about, your decision to join this workforce and, what you're hopeful for moving forward, even in an imperfect system.
I am really hopeful that everyone will be able to get healthcare, because going into healthcare, I don't want to be able to tell someone that their bill is too high or that they're going to be billed $1,500 for an x-ray. That's being someone in the middle class. It is very, very hard to go to the doctors when I need to and know that I have a bill stacking up. It's very stressful. And not only that, but being a college student during the pandemic and living on my own and having to pay rent and pay for college is extremely stressful, especially when if I get exposed to anyone who might have COVID-19, I have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. And it's I live paycheck to paycheck. In the middle class, that's what a lot of people do. So if I can't work for 2 weeks, I'm not making rent. I'm behind on my electric bill. I'm behind on rent. I'm behind on my car payment, car insurance. I can't go without any of these things, let alone my food or paying for internet, because now all my college classes are online. It's very stressful and it's very impactful on why I want to go into the healthcare field.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Senator, I want to come back to you again and just ask, obviously the working class has been a big part of your movements, and, what are you hopeful for in terms of labor rights in this country moving forward? We have a lot of folks at work who could really use some help.
Absolutely. The working class of America today is in worse trouble, Lucy, than any time since the Great Depression. It was in trouble before the pandemic, and it is worse right now. We have, in the last 5 months, seen many millions of people lose their jobs. And when you lose your jobs, in many cases, you lose your health care, because we don't guarantee health care to all people. It's just a job benefit. When people have no income, they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their mortgage. People are scared to death that they're going to lose their housing. People are going deeper and deeper into debt to pay for basic necessities. So that's where the working families of this country are. Now, what do we have to do? It's not really that hard. It's create many millions of good-paying jobs, and in my belief is that the federal government should guarantee a job. There's an enormous amount of work to be done. We need workers in education. We need workers in healthcare. We need workers in childcare. We need workers to rebuild our infrastructure. Make sure that everybody has good drinking water, that we have good wastewater systems. We need to rebuild our roads and our bridges. We need millions of workers to do all of that to combat climate change. So we've got to create jobs, and we have to make sure that those jobs pay people a living wage, at least $15 an hour. We have to make sure that workers can join unions. Right now, if you're a worker out there and you want to join a union, it's very, very hard, because your employer in many cases is acting illegally, making it hard for people to come together. So we have to pass legislation that makes it easier for workers to join unions. And again, in terms of healthcare, you've heard it over and over again. The lack of healthcare, the high cost of healthcare, the inability to afford prescription drugs is causing enormous stress in this country. I am talking to you, Lucy, tonight, 50 miles away from the Canadian border, Burlington, Vermont. And in Canada, everybody, rich or poor, young or old, you go to any doctor you want, you go to any hospital you want. If you end up in a hospital for 2 months, do you know what your bill is when you get out? Zero, not a penny. And yet, because they have a Medicare for all system, as a nation, they're spending half as much per capita as we are. So in all of these issues, whether it is healthcare, whether it's affordable prescription drugs, whether it is cutting military spending, whether it is immigration reform or criminal justice reform, we have to have the courage to take on very powerful, well-funded special interests. We can do it. Because at the end of the day, the 1% is 1%. And last that I heard, 99% is a lot bigger number than 1%. But people have got to get involved, they got to organize, and they got to stand up and fight. And when we do that, we can in fact create an economy that works for all of us and not just the few.
Incredible. Thank you, Senator. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Thanks to all of our panelists. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. Thanks on behalf of Teen Vogue to everyone at Friends of Bernie for putting this together with us. And Senator, I'd just like to turn it back over to you for any final thoughts for the evening.
Well, I don't have anything more to say except to thank you, Lucy, to thank Teen Vogue, to thank all of our panelists. You guys were great, and you inspire me, and I admire your intelligence and your courage and your willingness to stand up and fight for justice. So thank all of you, and let me thank all of the viewers out there. Thank you very much.